I'm Oli Monks, and I'm a second-year student here at Lancaster University. And I think you could call me normal. I mean, I'm of an average intelligence, at least to get me here anyway. Of an average height, minus a few inches. And I'm pretty optically challenged. But other than that, I'd say I was pretty normal. Yeah, I've always wondered whether normal is ever something we should be aspiring for. Whether we can even define normal. I know a lot of incredible people that you could never call normal. Today, I'm going to tell you about the most incredible person that I know. Now, at the age of 6, still a normal kid, I had that conversation that anybody with a younger sibling would know. Mum and Dad, they sat me down and they said that they'd made a baby and that not all Christmas presents were going to be for me anymore. You know, I had a lot of questions. Some were to do with the birds and the bees variety, as you might imagine. Some were to do with what life would actually be like with a younger brother or a younger sister. And yet, I knew one thing was for sure. I had a guaranteed best friend. Now, that best friend is 14 years old. His name is Nicky. He loves to draw. He wants to become an astronaut. And much to my disappointment, he absolutely hates football. Now, those are pretty normal aspirations, you might say. But my brother Nicky defies that label normal. At the age of 3, Nicky was diagnosed with an autistic spectrum condition. At the age of 10, we were told that Nicky had Crohn's disease, which is an inflammatory bowel disorder. It's not been an easy 14 years for Nicky. Now, I'm sure each and every one of you here could tell me your best and your worst memories from your childhood. And true, most autistic students in their school lives aren't fully integrated into the structures or into their school classrooms. Yet, most of Nicky's childhood memories so far have been in a hospital ward, rather than any school classroom. For me, I have an enormous amount of respect for my parents. They have sacrificed an awful lot to ensure that they care for Nicky and redesign their career paths to ensure that Nicky is healthy in both the short-term and his long-term future. Now for me, I'm well aware that it's easy to stress over all these professional challenges like exam results or interviews or grad schemes. I don't think it's too risky to suggest that everybody here or watching elsewhere, we're going to be just fine. Because if you show the interest in TED events and ideas and the values that we talk about, you'll be intelligent people, be engaged, and you'll be passionate. The question for us is not one of whether, but of how far. Now, you can't say the same for Nicky. Life is far more uncertain. I'm sure you can imagine as his brother, it's something that I've thought about a lot. Now, as we stand here today, only 15% of adults with autism are in full-time employment. 15. And that figure only rises to 31% when we begin to include all disabilities. And to you and I, the reasons they might not get into that job might seem fairly silly, and nothing really to do with their ability to perform that job. Because not everyone really understands the way that autism can affect a person's life. To many, their characteristics might seem aloof, or distracted, or unprepared. And yet, some might even be too anxious or nervous to even disclose their condition. As a result, many will seem inferior to any non-autistic applicants. Now, I'm not suggesting for one moment that people with autism are frequently discriminated against, not often at least. In my experience, much of the problem comes down to a misunderstanding. We can applaud many of the organizations who are truly committed and proactive in ensuring diversity in their workforce. Many companies will sign up to schemes and they will put policy through to ensure that people with disabilities are on an equal footing. Now, as well motivated as that might be, it is little more than the legal minimum. See, true equality doesn't come from a set of rules. It comes from an attitude that not only embraces, but understands the differences which define us as people. Now, talking about that attitude, as a society, we've come a long way in the past few decades. Society has changed, and so has the law. It's really warming to see that now people don't see disability discrimination as wrong because that's what the law says, because they view it as morally unacceptable. And disability discrimination is placed on the same footing now as racism and as homophobia and as sexism. And that's genuinely something we can applaud ourselves for here today. That's brilliant. But that's not what my talk is about here today. No. It's about a more subtle barrier between those with disabilities and real equality. I've had many years to watch the way that people interact with Nicky. And I can honestly say that not one of the people that I've seen interact with him have ever discriminated against him. They haven't. They don't let themselves get close enough for that. You see, when it comes to embracing disabilities into society, it's not about not doing it wrong. It's about doing it right. My brother has been an inspiration, a big motivating factor for me in terms of striving to become a better human being. It's a bigger motivation for me to set up a social enterprise project that I've done through a NATAS called Difference Enabled, which is trying to get people with autism into sustainable employment. And it's really enriching to see that the different attitudes and perspectives we can have in our social network. Yet, when we are so aware of the danger of discrimination, we miss out on all of the friendships. And not only is that a shame for us, but that's a shame, it makes it even harder for them to even create their own social network. And whilst there is a place for political correctness, when it begins to limit the way that we interact as a society, we must begin to reevaluate why that political correctness exists in the first place. Now, I'm not standing here today in front of you to say that I'm a perfect model of this and that I do all these things perfectly. I experience these same challenges with my own brother, with Nicky. Because autism strikes at the heart of the ability to connect to people. Let's not make it any harder. Now, I know each and every one of you here probably here have watched your fair share of TED Talks, and I'd like to share a quote with one of my favorite ones from the writer Faith Jagede, who said that the pursuit of normality is the ultimate sacrifice of potential. Personally, I couldn't agree more. And if there's one thing I'd like you to take away from this talk today, is that you don't just become good by following rules, but by going beyond them. If you interact with the person behind the disability, hey, it might just enrich your life. But I promise you this, it will enrich theirs. Thank you.